All right. Okay. So today is a very important lesson. Okay. Why? Because I'm going to focus on narrative writing. Many of you would prefer to write a story instead of uh, other types of essays, instead of writing an article, instead of writing a report, instead of writing a review. Students generally prefer writing stories. Okay, now today we are going to look into the advantages, disadvantages, why story and how story. Um, but I would want you to pay very close attention, and I would want you to internalize the lesson. Should you have any questions, you can ask me later. Okay, and if you think my slides are improving and they are interesting, the reason is Krishan. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, he has taught me how to develop nice slides, although I don't think it's up to the mark. But he's the one who taught me how to. I mean, I joined a workshop that he conducted, and I learned a lot from him. So, hence the slide. All right. So, what I did was I tried to incorporate your textbook syllabus on the topic Life's Great Mysteries with narrative writing. Okay. Let's see what we can learn. All right. Okay. Now, some random questions before the class. Now, this would be essential for those who are watching this lesson through YouTube, teachers, as well as students. You can answer these questions, or you can do a role play as to one person asks the question and another person answers, and this can be in pair, and then vice versa. So this would initiate speaking activity in the classroom. However, we would not be doing that now, because we would want to focus on the intricacies of narrative writing. All right. Okay, so some random questions here. How exactly did life begin? Why do we dream? What is the cure for cancer? Can we travel through time? Is our universe the only one? What exactly is consciousness? All right, moving on. Now, these are some fun facts. Okay, there are four um, uh, pictures that I collaged. I know it's not very neat. I'm very conscious about it being neat or not being neat because Krishan is in. Okay, Pravir, do you mind reading this for me? Oh, I've saved two essays for the two other
Alright,
boys.
so the first fact, there is a mysterious circle called the center of the universe in Tulsa, Oklahoma, sorry, in the United States, which is made of broken concrete. If you talk while standing in the circle, you will hear your own voice echoing back at you, but outside the circle, nobody can hear the echo sound. Even scientists are not so clear exactly why does it happen. The second fact, hikers exploring the Derbyshire Peak District in England came across a rare sight. A waterfall was flowing upwards. The Kendall waterfall was blown upwards due to extreme winds, making it seem as if the waterfall is flowing towards the sky. The third fact, in 526 AD, there was a worldwide dust cloud that blocked out the sun for a full year, resulting in a widespread famine and disease. More than 80% of Scandinavia and parts of China starved to death. 30% of Europe died in epidemics, and the empires fell. No one knows the exact cause. And the last fact, in 1977, five TV stations in the UK had their audio simultaneously hijacked for over 6 minutes by someone claiming to be Mayan and warning Earth. It is generally considered to be a hoax, but the identity of the intruder is still unknown.
Okay, these are all basically mysterious occurrences, huh? Especially the third picture. 80% of Scandinavia and parts of China starved to death. 30% of Europe died in epidemics. Okay, that's not as bad. I mean, uh, coronavirus is okay in comparison to that, isn't it? Okay, all right. Now, let's move on. So the lesson focus for today is narrative writing. Okay, narrative writing is basically story writing, and story writing is generally easier because you have a control over it. But what is the advantage? What is the disadvantage? We will go through the slides and we'll try to understand. All right, now the type of narrative writing, there's no specific format, so that you can't put it under a typology. For the format, it is generally the writer's or the narrative's point of view. It can be from the first person's point of view, second person's point of view, and third person's point of view. Most of the time, first and third. Language requirement, it can be descriptive. It should be descriptive. It should be expressive, informal. Informal in the sense that it is informal with the tone, because you set the boundaries or you set the tone. Okay. Unlike for articles or for report, there is a formal tone and you maintain the decorum throughout. Okay. A relaxed writing, you can use direct speech and idiomatic expressions. Okay. But don't overdo it. We'll come to that when we go into the details. Now, for the outline, plot, introduction, sequence of events, and conclusion. So you will see it is something very similar to literature lessons that you have learned in the past. Okay. Now we have exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. Okay. It goes by the flow of a story. Okay. Now overview. It is primarily based on imagination. As far as SPM is concerned, it is primarily based on imagination. It requires thorough creativity. It is entirely original. The writer has the freedom to influence the target reader with his or her personal perspectives on the narration. Right. Now, the advantages, it is entirely in the personal perspective of the writer. Logic and rationale are decided by the writer. Opinion over facts. Individual identity, style, imagination, personal interpretation, and thought would develop the story, whether it is convincing or not convincing. Now, here, what I would want you to understand is this: you have a very strong authority in your hand, whereby in a narrative writing, you can trust your opinion, you can trust your belief, you can trust your imagination into the examiner or the writer. But whether it would be convincing or it would not be convincing is totally dependent on how well you write. Okay. Now, the disadvantages. For the disadvantages, the parameter is set in the question. Okay. Now, although you have total control of what has to be in the question, what has to be in the answer, the question has its parameter. So your imagination has to be mature enough to make a perfect sense within the infringement of the parameter set. So dalam parameter yang diberi, within the limitations, the boundaries set in the question, you need to produce a mature piece of writing that makes perfect sense. Your language must be strong enough to convince the target reader as well. The flow and the fluidity of the ideas must be consistent. And there are no contents which are readily available. Now, expectations. What is expected out of you? The interest is aroused and sustained throughout the essay. Throughout the essay, your interest is aroused and sustained. Language is entirely accurate for you to get a high mark. Remember, you need to fall back to the same idea, or you need to constantly be reminded that your language or your essay will be marked on the basis of 4 criteria: content, communicative achievement, organization, and language. All right. Now, your language is entirely accurate. Sentence structure is varied. Vocabulary is wide and used aptly. Topic is addressed with consistent relevance. Okay. All right. Now, pre-writing prerequisites. Read the question carefully. Okay, what you've got to do. First, read the question carefully. Identify and underline the parameters or the keywords. And then identify your role. Are you the person who is going through it? Are you a witness? Are you a friend? Who are you? You need to be clear of who you are. Brainstorm the main story. Break the idea or the story to 6 fair sequences, and then develop the idea thereof. All right. Okay. Now, how do we develop the ideas? Think of a plot. It is one story, but you have 6 sequences. Think of a story, plan the plot. Write your plot in the sequences. You have 6 sequences. Like, for example, one story, break it into 6. Break it into 6 sequences. For factual essays, you can break it into content points. You can break it into either causes or implications or ways to overcome advantages, disadvantages. But for story, you can't find anything of that sort. So what you can do is you can break it into 6 sequences. Develop your plot with WH questions. And then add the following to aggrandize your essays, in the sense that you can add dialogues, expressive statements, quotes, idioms, and proverbs only when they are needed, and you have to bear in mind that they are used aptly. Okay. Now, for sequences, this is an idea of how you can do the sequences. You have the main idea or the main story, and you break it into 6 sequences. All right. So you have sequence 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But the idea is one main idea. All right. Now, I have some types of opening. Okay, I may seem to go a bit fast, but you will have the time when the lesson is uploaded by tonight. Okay, you can always go back, pause, and you can take down the notes or you can internalize. Now, I'm going to share some types of openings. The first type of opening is to describe the background of your story. Here, this sets things off in a straightforward manner, establishing clearly your characters and situation. Now, the example that I've given there is a very, very efficient example to describe the background. Okay, now let's see. There was once a poet who spent all his days shut up in his dark and shabby rented room on top of a coffin shop. Now, this one sentence gives you so much of information. For example, this person is a very contradicting person within himself, because a poet is someone who speaks, someone who expresses his feelings. But this guy lives a very reclusive life. He lives on his own, and he spends all his days shut up in his dark and shabby rented room. And this guy doesn't look normal. He has rented a room on top of a coffin shop. So it is adding to the mystery. Okay, is he a rich guy? Doesn't look so, because he's renting. And what sort of a place is he renting? It's dark and shabby. Okay, now what sort of a person he is? Does he mingle around? No. Does he do a job? No. He spends all his days shut up in his dark and shabby rented room, and no one knows what he does. So this gives you so much of information, and these ideas would establish the background to your story, which would help you to initiate the story in an efficient way. Now, the second one is to describe the setting. Describe the setting will create the mood for your story. For example, towards 2 o'clock, huge theater was thronged. Floor, gallery, boxes, and stage were all crowded. So many people were gathered in front of the box offices that the management had to telephone the police, fearing a riot. So now, what the idea that you get here is there was a pandemonium. It was a very chaotic pandemonium, and police has been called in. So it shows the situation. It sets the mood of the story by describing the setting. Now, thirdly, use direct speech. This can be a lively way to begin, especially if your character has something that grabs attention, says something that grabs attention. For example, may God wipe out my whole family if I'm lying, she whispered, raising hand in oath. Okay, so here, a person is in a very critical condition, and this person can't vociferate his voice loud. He's whispering, or she's whispering, but yet she's raising her hand in oath. So she's also taking an oath, and she's giving out a very strong statement, putting her entire family at stake. Okay. Use sounds. Using words which convey sounds is an easy way to start on a dramatic note. For example, plop, at the end of the fishing line, the lead at the end of the fishing line dropped into the sea. Okay, so these are the examples. Now, I'm going to share a sample of SPM 2015. Write a story about someone you know who took a big risk and had a good result, beginning with, everybody said that the plan would never work. It was far too risky. Now, the reason why I took this particular um, lesson is, or a question is, because it's quite similar to what you will be getting, or what is in the syllabus for this year. In the exam format, you'll be getting a narrative question like this. Okay, now can I request Kendrick to read this essay? The question is this: write a story about someone you know who took a big risk and had a good result, beginning with, everybody say that the plan would never work. It was far too risky. Now, this is a typical SPM question. This was asked in the past, and in the future there might be questions like this. Now, before Kendrick reads, give me a second. All right, Kendrick. Okay, you may start reading.
Everybody said that the plan would never work. It was far too risky, and I was far too feeble to make a decision and to abide by it. After all, the life I had to live was so deplorable that anything comes in a form of blessings is always perceived as something adverse in disguise. The genuine gesture of the selfless teacher was something beyond my comprehension at the point of time, and to risk myself against all around me then was a struggle against the smoldering storm. Yet with the courage I had mustered within me, I decided to give it a go, and that single decision has completely changed my life, from the pittance of hardship to the pinnacle of success. I never forget my humble beginnings, not to appear to be beaming with the pride of the achievements that dawned my head, albeit the painstaking path I had trotted along, but just to perpetually remind myself that anyone from any humble beginning can make it big out there if the right decision is used properly. I am the firstborn of my family and I have 7 siblings. By the time the youngest had started schooling, my dad was struck with a heart attack and he could work no longer. The burden to bear the responsibilities of the household had to be shifted on my mother's shoulders. My poor mother, a petite woman with a reserved nature, was just working as a cleaner in a supermarket near our house.
Okay, I'll hold you there, Kendrick. Now, you see, for the first paragraph, what you see is a background of that particular family. Here, for the introduction, it was a reflection of the entire essay. You see, you need to remember I have written a longer essay. There are a few reasons to it because, firstly, I want to introduce to you many vocabulary, many words, many new bombastic, grandiloquent words. Number two, I would want to show an extended idea. You can make it concise later. There's no problem because the limit for your writing is only 250 words. Now, let me also explain to you how I've broken this idea into a sequence. Now, here for the introduction, this introduction is a reflection of the entire essay. All right. Now, the second paragraph is the family background of this particular person. Okay, continue.
Good food is rarity. Sometimes we would yearn for a wedding invitation to come by our house so that could savor a hearty meal. Unfortunately, our relatives seem to have always missed dropping by our simple, humble flat to pass any invitations. We were obviously estranged. Even the thought of it hurts my inmost self. I have had I had have instances where my cousins would ignore me eventually because I did not belong to their purported level. Then I didn't have the time nor the need to toy over such trivial humiliations as the anticipation of what would be on our table to eat each day was a bigger worry. Sometimes all we have was overly cooked plain rice with some salt and green leaves thrown in it.
Okay, so this is the situation of the family. Just now was the details of the family members. Here, the financial economic state of the family. Okay, continue.
At school, I was blessed with a good memory power. I was able to grasp whatever the teachers taught. Everyone thought that it was my natural flair that enabled me to be so focused and excel in studies. Deep inside, I know that I had no choice. Should I miss the opportunity, I would be left in despair because tuition is too immense a luxury for me. Hence, I will have to study properly. My clothes will naturally be tattered, and so would my school bag. At least my condition was a consolation, as my siblings who were after me will have to use mine eventually. All these struggles seem something which are not common to the fellow students at the time. This worked in my favor as I somehow shone in the eyes of my teachers, and they have all been extremely benevolent to me.
Okay, now this particular paragraph talks about the ability and the blessing this boy is gifted with. Okay, how he is and how smart he is and what sort of a person he is, his behavior, his nature, and whatnot. Okay, so in this particular paragraph, it speaks about this person. This is how you break a story into sequences. That's what I'm trying to highlight here. Continue.
A day came, my class teacher, Mr. Shaikh, called me. I had no idea what he had in his mind. He was a man of few words. I went to his cubicle. He looked straight into my eyes and asked me, I am about to offer you something. Are you willing to accept my offer? I was befuddled. I have never been put in such a predicament that I started trembling even before he said what it was. I pursed my lips. He understood my state of shock and continued. I have been observing you since you were in Form 1. I see a lot of potential in you. SPM is in another 7 months' time, and until that, I wish to take you in my house and provide what I can so that you can just focus on the studies and do SPM to your utmost best. Discuss with your family and let me know. He uttered all this in one breath while I almost lost mine. Not knowing what to say, I curtly nodded and dashed off.
All right. So here it is about a teacher who has been observing this boy and who is now come to a point to offer him a favor. Now, this is how the sequence is progressing. Okay, continue.
On my way home, I was ruminating what Mr. Sheikh said, and it did not make sense anyway. I belong to a different faith and belief to start off with. We are different in each and every way. I rushed back home and narrated everything to my mother. My neighbor who came to see my mother at the time looked at me and said, "How would you have the heart to leave your sick father and poor mother to enjoy the luxury in that teacher's house? That's very selfish of you." Her words seared my heart with the fangs of the most venomous viper. Tears brimmed my eyelids. My mother said nothing while my father hushed me, signaling to wait for the woman to leave.
All right. Here, these are reactions and how, I mean, how the family member is reacting and how others around are reacting, because he's got to make a decision, you see. And now we are seeing the repercussion of the decision, or the reaction rather, of the decision. Not the repercussion yet, but the reaction. Okay, continue.
Later at night, we sat as a family. My siblings were all looking at me as if I don't belong to them anymore. There was so much of longing in their eyes. Words failed. The head of the family, though incapacitated, made the decision. His conviction convinced me. I went to my teacher and accepted the offer. He had an accomplished smile which foretold my future. I felt new within. Quietly, arrangements were made. The weekend, I moved into the teacher's house. He was all alone and he was an extremely busy man himself, with the tuition commitments and extra classes. In spite of his tight schedule, he made sure all of my needs are perfectly taken care of.
All right. Okay. Now here, the decision. Okay, the final decision that was made in the within the confinements of the family. Okay, next. Okay, continue.
As PM came, I toiled day and night, having my entire family's image as well as my teacher who had more trust that I had in myself. I did my best and the rest was history. I got straight A's and won a scholarship to go abroad to further my studies. Eventually, I graduated as a surgeon, and now I have my own trust, which I run by the name of the Good Samaritan, who offered me life through his kind gestures. I would have, if I would have taken in the negative remarks of my neighbor, Dan, or many others who heard so many nasty remarks, I would not have been able to elevate my family's condition. Today, two of my siblings are doctors, two others are teachers, one runs their own business, and another one works as a scientist in Germany. A sincere gesture accepted with a hopeful heart brought a paradigm shift in my life.
Okay, so this is somehow this is the resolution where it's a happy ending, and how a decision made by a person by risking something changed his entire life. Okay, so this is how you sequence it. Now, I'm going to share another story. This story won me a prize. This was a horror story. Okay, now to read this. Okay, this is okay for. Okay, I will warn you before this. Before I would get Christian to read the story. This is not the type of story that I expect you to write, or anyone would expect you to write. It may be too wordy and too long, but what I want you to learn from this particular story is the language, vocabulary, style of writing. Okay, this is based on my imagination, and you can take that imagination. It's a horror story. Okay, it is not entirely imagination, because I did take an inspiration from somewhere, because something similar to this happened somewhere so many years ago. So I took that inspiration and I sort of exaggerated it into a story. So, Christian Moon, are you ready?
Yes, sir, I'm ready.
All right, okay. All right. We will go paragraph by paragraph, yeah?
Okay.
Okay. All right, okay. Yes, Mon, you can start reading the first paragraph.
The winds of summer blew forth a blood-curdling secret from within them, a horror, very spiteful and malevolent, that has been in a limbo was up in the air. An irrevocable curse had sealed up the very village which was once a land of lusciousness and prosperity. The grim remaining of what is left, however, has nothing to attest to the former glorious state of the ill-starred village. The last family has left, leaving the entire village to tarry in its desolation. What would turn such a propitious oasis into a deplorable wilderness? What abomination could be puissant enough to have driven the inhabitants of the village out of their homeland? The village remained stoic, with a grievous darkness wailing in its belly. When the time comes, it would regurgitate the horror, unleashing a greater consternation.
Okay. Now, I love writing like this. Uh, if my students of many years would know my type of writing or my style of writing. Okay, I enjoy writing like this. I'm not expecting you to write like this. If you're able to write like this, I'll be very very happy. But I love writing like this. Now, what can be seen? What you see? The confinement or the boundary that the question might have given is it is a horror story, so you have to keep it within the limitations of it being a horror story. But you look at how I am initiating it. It looks like a village. I mean, I'm just giving you the background of the village, the current state. There are three situations, I've successfully explained: the current state of the village, the future, I mean the past of the village, the revolution of the village, and finally the current ill state of the village. And there is a comparison. So this is what you should successfully make. And once your examiner or your reader finish reading the first paragraph, they would want to know what actually happened. Now you see, I have given a hint on an abomination that is so puissant to have driven the villagers out of their homeland. Something that was so beautiful, a land of lusciousness and prosperity, is now ill-starred. Okay, so this is how you initiate. This is how you build the momentum. Of course, with exaggeration and expression, and that is necessary for a story. But you can't write an article or a report like this. No. All right. Okay, paragraph number 2. Hold on, Krishan. Okay.
A decade ago, this village called Barod was rather tranquil and unruffled. A fresh supply of clear-flowing waterways and the boon they carried through their bodies, lush green vegetation, cattle and farms that were in abundance, and a very civilized bunch of villagers who coexisted quite harmoniously. These were the traits of a village. Being very remotely placed from towns or any whimsical that would come with them, these villagers did not have the need to break away from what they were doing and how they were living. They were very contented with what they were and what they had. Each family had their own fortunes to manage, and they had everything else in the village as common possessions, from the waterways to the temple they worship.
All right. So here it's quite simple. It is about the background of the village. Okay, it is the background of it, or the former glorious background of the village a decade ago, just 10 years ago. Okay, how it was. All right, now next paragraph.
However, they had a secret that they would speak of. The villagers were guarding an ancient horror which they did not know of its nature or origin. For centuries, they had stayed away and stayed taciturn about it. Deep further, a couple of miles inside, there was a ruin of what may seem like a worship sanctuary. The villagers are forbidden from going anywhere near there, and they have spoken of the place as something that hides a very dreadful mystery that is well beyond human apprehension. Although the villagers practiced deity worship, what was said to be lingering beneath the ruins of the ancient remnant was surely proscribed even to know, as it was said to be of such disconsolate macabre.
Okay, so here in this particular paragraph, what you see is the secret they're hiding. Now, this paragraph serves as the rising action. This is rising towards something, because there is an ancient horror which could be a disconsolate macabre. Okay. All right. Now that is the rising action. Okay. Continue. Hold on. All right.
On a fateful day, the village was visited by a conspicuously flamboyant couple. The villagers, who rarely get visitors, welcomed the couple with outstretched arms. The couple claimed themselves as traditional healers, and they were on a mission to seek herbs from the interiors of the forest. As the village did not have traditional medicine practitioners, they allowed the couples to stay with them. The pair was also such amazing sweet talkers that they could win the hearts of the villagers. Eventually, the village headman narrated the story of the occult mystery that was hidden deep in the forest. A spark of glistening gleam beamed on their eyes. They exchanged a menacing look between them.
Okay, now this talks about a couple, a very flamboyant couple who came into the village, okay, claiming to be doctors, claiming to be traditional healers, okay. Now, still rising action. Now, let's move on to, okay, and you see rising action, but however, a very significant incident happens here whereby they were very flamboyant, so everyone started to like them. So the village headman shares the story of the occult mystery that was hiding deep in the forest. Okay, so no one knows who are these two people. Okay, now continue.
The couple was exceptionally quiet from that day onwards. They seemed to be focusing on what they claimed to have come for. The naive villagers too carried on with their chores, besides being largely receptive hosts without any dubiety. The ancient ruins, which was a forbidden ground, was surely not a place the villagers would have anticipated for the couple to have ended up. The truth was the couple was a pair of necromancers. Having heard of the folklore of the forlorn evil entity that was concealed beneath the ancient ruins, these two tactfully sneaked past the village with the intention to conjure the evil entity of the past. It was passed on to them that anyone who would summon and consulate with the entity would be a master of invincible power.
Okay, so here the truth about the couple is divulged, whereby they are a pair of necromancers. So what do necromancers do? They call upon the dead souls. They call upon, they conjure, and they invoke the evil spirits which are dead or which are put at rest. Okay, continue. Now, climax.
Blinded by avarice, the couple advanced to the prohibited ground and fervidly looked for ways to invoke the ancient spirit. There, beyond the shattered ruins, stood a statue of a deity which was shackled. The statue of the deity which was fettered resembled the perfect embodiment of all evil assembled into it. A random human would go feeble on his knees just by beholding the sight of the deity. The couple, however, started their saltation around the statue, wailing and crying out loudly as though they had unlocked their mission. Right before the statue, there was a huge altar on which some dried old skulls were seen. Drawing the machete beneath the altar, the man broke the chains that held the feet of the deity. It soon dawned upon them that they must perform human sacrifice on the altar to call forth the spirit from its slumber. Realizing that their mission was so close at hand, they went into the village to lure a young maiden to be sacrificed on the altar. By then, the couple had already built a good rapport with the villagers.
Okay, now you see they have planned for a human sacrifice. So this is climax. Okay, now yes, continue.
That night, the night that they planned came. Years of their yearning were going to be fulfilled. Both the spouse was wearing garlands made of skulls, and there was blood everywhere, of buffaloes, bulls, and goats. The young maiden that was lured to be sacrificed was also there, unconscious and thoroughly dipped in blood. The altar was set ablaze. The machetes were drawn, and the deity was splashed with blood of the already slaughtered animals. Suddenly, the altar trembled tumultuously. The spouse that were dancing on a hysteric trance, started cutting themselves. Blood gushed out of both their bodies. A young girl who was meant for the sacrifice was nowhere to be seen. The couple fell dead on the ground, losing their lives due to the excessive blood loss. A loud wail was heard across the village, sending a warning of the evil that has broken forth.
Okay, now we are going to go through the resolution. Now, this is there, the scene there, the climax scene there has ended. So let's see how the story resolutes.
The grim darkness swept over the plot of the village. The villagers started to feel the dreadful evil that they do not even dare to speak. It is finally out. They could sense it,
Feel, yeah, sense of feel.
feel its evident presence everywhere. Green vegetation turned pale. The livestock started to die due to mysterious ailments. There was a heavy stench of blood in the air. At nights, there were sightings of some sooty apparition which literally stole the sleep of villagers. People were drenching in fear and anxiety. They could all conclude that the village was not a habitable place anymore. The family of the missing girl committed suicide, and that brought the whole lot of them to the brink of breaking point to leave the village for good. What once seemed the most secured home became their most dreadful nightmare. Fully vacated, the village remained solemnly silent, inundated with the unspeakable horror which could not wait to break forth yet again.
Okay, now this is a typical horror story that I wrote, and I definitely don't expect you to write something like this. But what I would also like to suggest and recommend is to have a sequence which is interesting, intriguing, and engaging. Therefore, your story would remain intact. Okay, now this is a question from your textbook, actually. Okay, can you write a story for our magazine series? Your story must begin with this sentence. As Mark was about to throw away the old bottle, he saw that there was a piece of paper in it. Your story must include a message or map, a surprise. So you see, your limitations are, or your boundaries are, it's a boy, his name is Mark, and he was about to throw away the old bottle. So he must have found some old bottle, and he's throwing it away. Before throwing it, he saw a piece of paper in it. From there, you can take the reader to an entirely adventurous fantasy world. That is totally up to you. As long as your story has a message or a map, it can be a map to the lost world of Atlantis. Okay, and it has to have a surprise element, and that is the boundary. So within the boundary, you are allowed to write whatever that is engaging and interesting. Okay, now I am also a narrative writing person, so I enjoy narrative writing. But for that, you need to remember two things. Number one, a good language proficiency. Number two, a matured imagination which makes sense within the confinement of the questions. Okay, now that's about it. Okay, now any questions, students? Do you have any questions?
No, sir.
All right.
No, sir.